There are no lack of legends on the invention of tea. You start with the basic tea plant, Camellia sinensis, dry and process it, and place it in hot water. The result is an herbal wonder with medicinal properties. The plant is native to the Himalayas on the China-India border, so only the emperor can claim a Chinese invention. So he did. The Emperor Shenyang of 5,000 years ago, when dried leaves fell into his boiled water. Or Buddhist monks brought tea from India, possibly after the Buddha invented it. The name Ta seems to come from the Han Dynasty about 200 BCE. Whatever the start date, tea drinking was an ancient Chinese delight. The 8th century tea master Lu Yu wrote the classic tea ceremony manual Ta Ching, suggesting a top-selling masterpiece. It was a celebration of life according to fabled Confucian tradition, also consistent with Buddhist and Tao traditions, written during the Tang Dynasty. The classic explains the ancient processes from harvesting, steaming, pressing, drying, and storing tea leaves, the utensils needed to brew and drink tea, proper preparations, and drinking. The camellia is a tea tree. If left to its own devices, it's a semi-tropical evergreen growing to about 10 feet tall. It was usually kept to about waist length for easier trimming. The leaf is roughly 2 to 6 inches long and an inch or two wide. Harvesting was labor intensive, with the leaves cut by hand, then dried, with different methods that resulted in different types of tea. Different processing methods result in green, black, oolong, yellow, or white tea. Green is the kind preferred by the Chinese and requires the shortest processing time. This includes drying or withering to reduce the water content, firing or frying to prevent oxidation, and then the leaves are rolled and dried. For black tea, the green leaves are dried, rolled, fermented, dried again in an oven, then completely dried over wood fires, and finally sorted to separate the different grades. For oolong, the oxidation time is shorter than for black tea. Chinese peasants sold their tea to middlemen who shipped it to the coast and sold to merchants. The merchants blended the teas, packaged them, and sold the various products to the domestic market, other Asian markets, and later to European merchants. The good stuff usually stayed local, while inferior teas were sent abroad. European armies would change the formula somewhat later. There was no evidence that Rome knew about Chinese tea. Marco Polo mentioned a tea tax, but the emperor was Kublai Khan, a Mongol who drank horse's milk. Jesuit priests in the 16th century seemed to be the first Europeans. The Portuguese developed trade routes to India and China and started sending tea to Lisbon later in the 16th century. The Dutch East India Company ruthlessly squeezed out the Portuguese, and tea became a Holland staple by 1700. The Dutch tea and spices trade scared the hell out of English merchants and the British powers that be. Dutch success meant British failure. They quickly created the English East India Company on the model of the Dutch as a joint stock company. That meant a company with no experience sending ships around Africa to India and beyond. Somehow the ships succeeded at the cost of about half the sailors. Long term, the English developed larger capital markets, more ships, and equal ruthlessness to take over Indian trade and effectively conquer the country. Catherine, the new Portuguese wife of English King Charles II, brought her tea habit to the British court in 1662 along with a chest of tea as part of her dowry. The habit spread and tea became an English staple. The East India Company started importing tea in 1669. Making connections directly with Chinese merchants and then creating tea plantations in India resulted in the company generating most of its revenue from tea. Tea houses were opened in London and beyond for men only. Tea shops were open to women, and tea gardens opened for all. Over time, tea became affordable to the masses. The tea culture gained increasing importance next time on Food History and Mystery.